Standard Group Center on Mombasa Road. To the world on KTN, on Spice FM, on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on TikTok, everywhere else. Asante sana for tuning in. Ndu?
Yes.
Because we'll be talking about money. Let's keep talking about money. Silio?
Yes.
It's about what? Creating wealth, accumulating that wealth, protecting that wealth so that it can benefit you, your family, and into generation more than you.
Exactly. And it sounds great, doesn't it? But most times you're not really sure how to do it, where to start, who to talk to, where to go. All those 4 issues can be answered if you speak to the folks at Standard Chartered, because they understand that, you know what, it can be a bit confusing in this big bad world of finance and investment. Where are you going to start? Who are you going to go to? And they say, okay, look, we've been able to put all of our experience into a one-on-one conversation, and we can have that with you. How do you start? You send an email, wealth.kenya@sc.com. All right? wealth.kenya@sc.com. Just tell them, look, my name is Ndu. I want to be able to have something secure for the future. I want to grow it. Where do I start?
I want to be wealthy.
There you go. I want to be rich. Okay. So they will tell you, you know what you do? Let's have a chat and let's show you how to go about this. And they will make sure that they don't leave you by the way. Wealth.kenya@sc.com. Create it, manage it, grow it.
Yes. So from the 25th of November to the 10th of December is 16 days of activism against gender-based violence marked worldwide. And this is just to raise awareness about this issue of gender-based violence. And we said we are going to be having these conversations daily, if need be, for these 16 days. Well, we'll not have them tomorrow and Sunday, but then you get what we mean. We'll participate elsewhere. And it's just to make sure that we bring these conversations to the fore. What is it that's happening in our society? What do we need to do to address this? We are joined once again by Sylvia Maina, who's a gender communication specialist at UN Women in charge of Eastern and Southern Africa. Good morning, Sylvia.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome back.
Asante sana. Really nice to be here as usual.
Silio?
Yes.
I know. I feel the same.
Isn't it? We've made you a GBV champion, anti-GBV.
Kabisa.
Very nice.
And Baldwin Anyiga is from the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. He's an economist. Baldwin, good morning.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm very fine, Latif.
Karibu sana.
Welcome.
This is the hot seat of the situation room.
Yeah.
Na wakati serikali imekuja hapa, tunafurahi sana. Tunafurahi sana.
Okay.
Serikali inatembea.
Yeah.
People don't know the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action is under which ministry?
Okay, thank you for having me here. This is my first time here. So the State Department for Gender is under the Ministry of Gender, Culture, the Arts, and Heritage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Those
good.
entire concussions.
It's that
gender
big, it's that big ministry.
Yeah.
Who's your PS?
PS is Madam Anne Wangombe.
Okay. Who's CS?
We are still waiting for the CS.
Waiting.
Yeah.
Agenda up.
But the ministry is functioning very well, and that's why we are here for these interventions.
Serikali inaendelea.
Yeah, there's no vacuum in government. It continues.
Never.
Yeah, never.
Never ever.
Yeah.
So Siti will welcome you with the day's proverb. But before he does that, there's something else that he'll tell you. Something that's happening up to the 2nd of December. And this is just about thinking Christmas is here. Uko na pesa kidogo na unataka kuspend, like hata kama hauna, but you need to spend. Siti.
Do you believe that it is better to give than to receive? Do you also believe that in giving you actually receive? Well, Woolworths are telling you this. If you go to any of their outlets, it started just the other day, it's going on up to the 2nd of December, and you buy 3 items, three, one of them will be free. So as you buy, you get. Now, we all have relatives, we all have loved ones. I shouldn't have said relatives. Some people don't like their relatives.
But we all have them.
But we all have them.
Regardless.
Yes, exactly. And as we head towards December, one of the things that occupies our mind is the season that December ushers in. It ushers a season of giving, the season of Christmas. So, awaken your mind, open your wallet, open your purses, consider Go to any Woolworth outlet and look at the array of offers that they have. Buy any 3, and that third item will be free of charge. Yes.
Aya, you know your story, Sylvia?
You know, I won't talk about women and shopping. I'm one of the perpetrators, so... Yes, that is a very good story.
Why do you call it, what do you call it retail therapy?
Retail therapy, because you feel much better.
Yes.
So it's like medicine for the soul.
Yes.
Yes, so that sounds like a very good deal.
Okay.
Latif has noted.
Okay. City,
Hey.
the proverb.
Yeah, yes, this is the final day of our Proverbs from the kingdom of Swatini. Next week will be in the country of Mozambique, Republic of Mozambique. Okay? A runaway monk never speaks well of his monastery.
A runaway monk never speaks well of his monastery.
Wale watu. Ay, 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 ay. In fact, I wonder why people stay there. That one.
There's one who came and spoke to us here as a runaway monk. He's now a professor.
Is it?
Anyway, no, that's not the issue. What's your interpretation of the proverb, Sylvia?
Latif, you've started again with me today with the proverb. Let me go ahead.
You see, you're used to these things.
Isn't it?
We've got
Yes.
to help Baldwin just see how it's how it's done.
Yes.
Okay, I'll do that for Baldwin. So, the runaway monk never speaks well of his monastery.
Yes.
So basically, it's that thing of when you live somewhere, you want to make it look like you're not the problem, but it's the place that's the problem. So it's kind of like a defense mechanism to talk bad of the place that you've come from. Maybe the person was not well received there or had some issues there that they were caught up in and they had to leave. For whatever reason. So they want to blame the place rather than looking into themselves, introspecting and understanding what could have led to that issue.
That's a good one. Your cabinet iko na shida. Watu hawabii rais kweli.
Yes.
Na rais anapenda. Mimi tu ndio nilikuwa namwambia ukweli. Hao wengine wote hawabii.
Watu hawapendi ukweli.
Yes. Well, do not your interpretation.
It's a tricky word, but I think the more of it is whenever you're faced with a problem, be there, handle it, deal with the pressure that comes, and forge ahead. Yeah, you don't need to run away. Yeah.
Both interpretations are perfect. Thank you.
Stay in the monastery.
Deal with the real issue.
Yeah, deal with the root cause.
Let us share the experience with you.
Live with your consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
Your choices.
We have to come officer.
I'm telling you, take it on the chin.
Yes. It's a season. Yeah, you can overcome it. Yeah.
Well said.
Very well said. So your State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action, of course, has the mandate to look at gender issues, right?
Yeah.
Now, in these 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, this falls right into what you should be doing and how you spearhead the conversation and the fight against gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So, briefly, what is that fight and what's the government doing?
I think the government is doing a lot to fight gender-based violence, and it has a strong stance against gender-based violence because we look at the negative impacts that it has on individuals, communities, and even societies at large. And therefore, there are very strategic issues around creating awareness that the government is actually doing in collaboration with the different partners. One of our major key roles is around gender policies or policies that will create an environment that is free from any form of violence or even gender discrimination. So we spend a lot of chunk of our time trying to develop or strengthen, legal policy and even institutional frameworks that will curb or actually eradicate gender-based violence. So in brief, those are the key things we undertake to suppress GBV at national level.
Are there different categories of gender-based violence? Like, are there types of gender-based violence?
Yeah, so we have around 4 broad types or forms of gender-based violence. The most common one is the physical violence, where people are hurt, people are killed, and, it causes harm to your physical well-being. Then there is the sexual violence, and then there is psychological or emotional kind of violence. And then there is the other one that we are calling economic violence, in terms of even denying your partner or other colleagues the opportunities to earn resources or to participate actually in economic activities. So broadly, there are about 4 types of gender-based violence. Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess then for you, Sylvia, some of the times that we look and say there must be eradication of this, it has to come to an end at some point. It's also then important to keep looking at the causes. What have we seen are the causes of GBV, and they seem to be so deeply rooted that it seems to be so difficult to eradicate. Why, and what are some of these?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I think it's something that we all grapple with. We more or less all agree what GBV is, and I say more or less because not everybody agrees it's bad in different contexts or in different dynamics. But we don't really have a very good handle case by case necessarily on what is the actual issue. But one of the things that we've definitely seen is an issue is culture. Yeah, and actually for me, even as Baldwin was telling us the name of the ministry, it just occurred to me actually that it may not even be misplaced that Ministry of Gender is with Ministry of Culture. I've never even thought of it before. But culture is one of the things, and that's why you find maybe GBV is highest in Africa. It's among the areas that has it highest. Different forms, again, piggybacking on what Baldwin said, the physical, the sexual here again covers child marriage, it covers FGM. Unfortunately, the Eastern Southern African region really sticks out globally, even for those 2 particular types of GBV. So culture is a very big informant, and culture, I think, would also cover patriarchal thinking. So at UN Women, there's this mantra that we have now of pushing back against the pushback. So globally, we're really seeing the patriarchy fighting back. The last time we were here, we were talking about how because of that male privilege, if I can say, we find that the more women are getting empowered, it's almost like in some contexts, the angrier men are getting. So there's a form of retaliation. Right, so that's one big factor. But I think underlying all GBV, whether it's SGBV, economic, there's the issue of control. It's always about power imbalances, and that's why we talk extensively about women economic empowerment, which of course also includes education, which again, I want to link back with what Baldwin talked about in terms of economic violence. One of the ways that economic violence is carried out even is by denying education. Yeah, because that then cuts someone at the knees, and you're not able to go and be that productive citizen and stand on your own. So that kind of coercive control is one of the main reasons that we see this. In contexts like during COVID or during crisis, one of the things that we see is a big driver of GBV is economic challenges. Right, because we know during COVID, for example, a lot of people lost their jobs, lost their businesses. So there's that frustration or anxiety or other things that pop up, including substance abuse, that all really drove the numbers up over and above many people being locked in with the perpetrators during the lockdown at COVID. And also because there was really nowhere to run. Yeah, so I think a lot of those dynamics, and of course, again, humanitarian contexts where basically state has fallen apart, there's no law and order. So you find GBV, especially SGBV, really coming up on the rise. That's where you find countries like Sudan. I think the last time we talked about, was it 6.7 million people in Sudan as of, I think, a few months ago are at risk of GBV. And this is just because there's no infrastructure, there's no law and order at the moment. So where do you report? Who will address it? Yeah, those are just some of the drivers.
I want to just maybe zero in a little bit more, that when we talk about culture and practice and tradition, a high percentage, if not all of these practices, were being carried out before definitions. right? Before definitions and descriptions of certain experiences came, gender-based violence was not a thing before, when tradition and culture was being formed or when it was being practiced. These things came after the fact. Some of the things that you talk about, early marriage, been happening forever. FGM, been happening forever, been happening for the longest time. So can you look at that as one of the reasons why it would be very difficult then to eradicate, because these are things that have been around for hundreds of years. So, wrong or not, right? The fact that you have to deal with something that has been ingrained, compacted, conditioned in the minds and practice of people, and now you're saying maybe just a few years of definition is being asked to uproot hundreds of years of practice. How do you deal with that?
I love the words you've used: ingrained, compacted, and even uprooting, because uprooting is such a descriptive word. You're right. I mean, these are things that have centuries-old history, especially in our context. But there are some things that have no place in the modern world. Yeah, we'll just be categorical about that. And when you look at human development, what are some of those indicators of human development? One of them is women and girls feeling safe, for example. Yeah, if we've already established, because of human development, that FGM is detrimental to women's physical, sexual, and emotional health, regardless of whether it was being done before, then it's something that we need to nip in the bud. Things change. Like I tell my son sometimes, there's a difference between fact and truth. So at some point we thought the world was flat, right? We were very convinced.
It is.
I like that. You want to challenge the physicists or astrologists? Yeah, so it was a fact, so to speak, at the time. But now we know that it's not the case. Yeah. So while such cultural practices may have been going on at the time, they may have worked in that context for whatever reason. If you look at things like child marriage, again, it wasn't preventing anybody from going to school. It was part and parcel of society at the time. But now if we engage in such practices, what happens? Girls are left out of school. I'm sure Baldwin can tell us how that affects the economy in the long term, because they can't meaningfully participate. It affects GDP, so there are things that really just do not belong in the modern world.
This whole gender violence story, when we throw in the psychological aspects of it, the social, the cultural, it becomes an interesting discussion. Now it gets even more interesting when you bring in what you call the power dynamics. Now, but when we talk about men feeling disempowered, you have to ask the question, so what is it that they felt empowered them in the first place? Because it appears like it was removed, so what is it? Because if I look at the traditional role of men, among them was to protect the family. So they were the protectors of these very women who are now being violated. They were the protectors. That has changed. They are not the protectors. They're the violators. I say this because men still are protectors, but if you look at the increase of violence that is directed at women, it begs the question. Because something is clearly wrong somewhere. This whole societal norm that we had, this thing has shifted drastically.
That is so profound, CT. I was just looking at data from South Africa. Of course, I always try and bring in the regional perspective to show that this is a global issue. It's common in our context and also down to the local level in Kenya. And out of all the violence that happens against women, 60% is by intimate partners. I found that very interesting. And there's also studies that are showing that even in Kenya, actually, and Uganda, women are safer. They feel safer outside the home. I found that very bizarre. So, in fact, some of the data we have from the past few years, 11%, I think, of women are attacked when they are outside the home by unknown people. I think the number was about 22% are attacked when they're by a neighbor, for example. That's a perpetrator of the GBV, whether it's SGBV or other forms of violence. But 33%, 3 times what they get outside is what they get in the home. I found that very disturbing. Yeah, so like you're saying, the protector has now become the
what is this thing that has twisted and turned this person's psyche so that the role that they played or the role that they understood was theirs has now, this one is not even inversing or turn around. This thing has been corrupted completely. So they now find it necessary to respond with that level of violence, and it seems to increase. What is it that has twisted and turned this person? And we are seeing cases that are even more bizarre. People turn on children.
I think maybe at the solution level, what the State Department is trying to come up with is what we are calling male engagement and inclusion kind of strategy, because it has always been a backlash on whenever we advance activities of anti-gender-based violence. So we actually want to identify the strategies that we can use to engage men and also include them in the entire sphere of promotion of gender equality and also empowerment of women. One, as partners. Two, and also to address the specific needs of men so that we can bring them on table so that we don't antagonize the entire process of promotion of gender equality. And there are right holders in the societies which they come from.
You know, yesterday we had a conversation with Angela Ambito, founder and CEO of InfoTrack.
Yeah.
And she was giving us case studies of some of the work that they've done in terms of just surveys. And some of those surveys have been on sanctioned by government or agencies such as the UN agencies to look at communities and how communities think and how communities would respond to certain programs.
Yeah.
Like so sort of ahead of behavior change campaigns. What is it that the communities would do? And she was giving us examples, for example, voluntary male circumcision, and going to the communities that do not culturally practice male circumcision and seeing how do you communicate with them so they feel that, okay, this does not take away what I believe is dear, but it actually enhances my health. Yeah. When you talk about uptake of just those treated mosquito nets, you'd assume just give them mosquito nets, and what that means. Has there been any such survey that has been conducted when it comes to GBV to find out what is it that communities, because the communities are different, what is it that this community feels and thinks and perceives GBV to be, the men, the women, and what are the areas to avoid? How do you approach the communication? Has there been such a survey?
Yeah, the number of government sanctioned surveys, and the major one is usually the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey that measures extensively the issues of gender-based violence, and the recent one was done in 2022, and we have such a modules, and we went actually to communities to ask them different questions on gender-based violence from all the categories we have mentioned. And we were asking questions like, have you ever, experienced this form of violence? And if you have experienced, how often have you experienced it? And at analysis stage, we are able now at national level to map the prevalences of such a categorization. Not only for, since they were age 15, but also in the, previous 12 months. We also measured even simple questions like opinion questions, is a woman justified to be beaten if he has done, some specific reasons? For example, being unfaithful, leaving children, burning food. And Kenyans gave their opinions, and you'll find, there are those kind of statistics. We went even to communities to ask them whether they feel harmful practices like FGM should continue, and we got the percentages.
So they are varied. Are they varied? So that, for example, there are those who feel it should continue. There are those who feel if a woman burns food in the house, she should be beaten.
Yes.
There are those who feel if she leaves her children and does whatever, she should be beaten up. Okay.
Yes, both men and women.
So do they feel the same? Men and women answer that they say
and
yes.
In some cases, women more than men.
Okay.
Yeah. But the most highly ranking is the one of being unfaithfulness and also leaving children unattended to ranks the most in terms of justification of a woman being beaten. So, Eric, that is the major survey that has been done. And from the analysis because it's usually done periodically, you will see substantial decrease in gender-based violence at a national level. But when you disaggregate the data by county level, you will find some counties being high, what we are calling the hotspot counties, either for gender-based violence itself or even for FGM, and that are known at national level.
So when you now want to do this male engagement and inclusion, right, as you go into these communities, are you going there armed with how best to communicate to these men so that you change their perception? Also, how best then to communicate to the women so that you change their perception? Because you've just been asking them, do you think it's justified for if a woman deserts her home to, get beaten? Now, if you want them to change, both men and women, do you know what you need to tell them so they can buy into this conversation?
Maybe I go further than that. You go outside there and pick information. Once you pick this information, you analyze and see how are the numbers behaving. And as a government, one of the first thing, and I think I've talked about it, is, how can we regulate this? How can we integrate some of this information in terms of the policies or the legal frameworks we are developing? How can we tailor-make, our community outreach so we are informed with such information? So at the point we are collecting data, we don't really go out to really explain, because we don't want to interfere with the whole process of collecting data and make it biased. You collect it as a neutral data collector, you analyze it, it informs you, and then you generate evidence-based decision.
So my question is, now that you're rolling out a program that's addressing this particular one, and you're saying we want to talk to men and we want to talk to women. Do you have communication messages that go specifically targeted to men and not men in urban, men in Busia, men in Narok, men in Kwale, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think I've said a word on it. At the moment, we are developing strategies because that is what has been one of our critiques, that we seem to leave men out of the conversations on gender issues. So we are actually, holding meetings with the stakeholders to develop an entire strategy document that will inform not only government but anybody, even non-state actors, on how can we include men and the women in this entire sphere.
Are you asking the men and the women what it is they would like in the conversation, in the strategy, or what method are you using to determine that the strategy you're coming up with, one, will be accepted, and B, it will cover what the communities consider to be important to them?
Yeah, it's an open and government is full-on public participation. So stakeholders are invited and they give their views. I know we have a group of men who believe, their issues should be given a priority. But if you look at the historical kind of information, you'll find, women are a little bit lower, that we should try to consider them. So we're trying to balance those forces and the common good that will help us eliminate GBV.
City, hold on. Let's take a break. It's 23 minutes to 8. We're having a conversation about gender-based violence as we commemorate 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Baldwin Anyiga is an economist from the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. Sylvia Maina, gender communication specialist at UN Women, in charge of Eastern and Southern Africa. Sylvia will be stepping out and she'll give room to Joanne Kenyanjui, a GBV responder and gender champion at Grassroots Kenya, just to hear what Grassroots Kenya has been doing and their practical case studies, and in fact, she's on the ground. She'll be giving us what they actually encounter, even in those conversations among men, among women, young children, young boys and girls. Let's take this break. Back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Hii Krisi, sambaza furaha na Safaricom Business. Zidisha biashara yako na 25% off kwa business internet plans. Reliable internet ni key kwa biashara yako. Ukiwa na 5G speed na huduma za Safaricom Business, una
All right, not too much traffic to contend with this morning. On the Thika Superhighway, not looking too bad. We'll probably see some traffic right around Survey last for some time. And then coming out towards the roundabout. But then Wangari Maathai, very busy as you head out towards Chiromo. And it looks like it'll be busy then connecting with the Hulu Highway in one direction or going out towards Westlands. Now is when we're starting to see traffic build on Limuru Road. It's also busy coming in from the northern bypass. And then heading out towards Kiambu Road. That looks like it's going to be busy for a beat. All right, Landis Road in and outbound traffic is doing the thing. Haile Selassie will be busy for the next month, that we know. Valley Road also an escape route for a lot of folks who want to get away from Haile Selassie. Take a look at the eastern bypass, and there is traffic coming out towards North Airport Road at the Cabanas interchange. Outer Ring has some traffic inbound as well. We're stepping into traffic hour. Let us know what's going on where you are, and we'll talk on Spice FM KE. Hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
All right, we continue our conversation. 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Baldwin Anyiga, economist at the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. We're now joined by Joanne Ongeshi Kinyanjui, who's a GBV responder and a gender champion at Grassroots Kenya. Joanne, good morning.
Morning, sir.
How are you?
I'm very fine.
Karibu tena.
Thank you.
It's Kenya's biggest conversation. And we continue the conversation here. So Baldwin had told us, what the government is doing at national level and also working with the sub-national governments. Policies, looking at developing policies, strengthening the policies, a legal and a legislative framework that then helps in the fight against GBV, even categorizing and identifying GBV in the various forms: physical violence, sexual violence, emotional violence, economic violence, and the work that is done. And we've been discussing that. I think the first thing that we want to ask you is, because you are the one who actually now handles cases of GBV in the communities, you are called by people who tell you there's a case here that we need to respond to, and you respond to it. You help communities in championing and for anti-GBV. Then you also help communities in the pursuit of justice. Do you ever have a conversation in these communities and ask people why there's violence?
Of course, yes.
And what's the answer?
What I really do to the community is just to enlighten them on the situation, because gender-based violence is a menace in the community, and it's a day-to-day violence occurring in villages, in home to home. And my biggest law is to sensitize them, and also make them to ensure that gender-based is existing, and it's a global problem. Yeah.
Do you ask them why there's violence? Do you know? Why do we see many cases of gender-based violence?
What they really answer to my question, sometimes they say that there is poverty. Mm-hmm. There is culture that is hindering women in different activities, especially economic activities. They also says that alcoholism has contributed a lot towards gender-based violence. They has also added about the economic issues. Yeah.
So when you say alcoholism contributes, what does that do? So the person who's taking alcohol and getting alcoholic is then abusive, or is the victim?
The person who is taking alcohol is the perpetrator. Yes.
But we've also seen in some cases, in some communities, where they are the victim of violence.
Maybe in my area, actually, men being the most perpetrators are the ones who are taking alcohol. And as you know, in our culture, men are the ones who are supposed to put food on the table. And when this question of providing comes, they actually start violence.
So they push back.
They
with violence.
push back as a defense mechanism.
Do they also get beaten?
They get bitter.
No, do they get beaten?
In my area, no.
Do you remember the cases that came out of Nyeri a couple of times, months back, and even Kiambu, where the cases of men being battered because they have gone into alcoholism, they are not providing, they've become useless, they've become deadbeat, and therefore they are, so the women would then slap them, beat them, tell them, go out there, I'm not giving you any food, I'm the one who's provided this food.
Even this morning, I've heard men saying that they are being beaten by women. But in my area, men are very cunning. You can't beat a man, a Kikuyu man.
They can even beat you for saying that you were beaten by a woman.
According to Gacha.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because you mentioned alcohol. So if alcohol is, introduced into this scenario, and then we get this violence, are we saying that if we removed alcohol, if people were not drinking, right, then we would not see the violence?
The violence will be there because there are many causes of gender-based violence.
Sure.
Yes.
In fact, there is established linkage globally in terms of relating alcoholism and gender-based violence. In fact, some of the surveys, alcoholism is used as a proxy for all drugs, and therefore it has connotation towards increased GBV. But when they are sober, those kind of studies, that the man or the other parties is very calm.
Exactly.
But when they take alcohol, then that thing is triggered within them. That's why there is a strong linkage between alcoholism or drugs.
And so the
violence.
likelihood of an individual not being violent towards their partner then is greatly reduced if the element of alcohol is also removed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has that ever been looked at then when you talk about reform and what's the word people use when you go to a place?
Rehab.
Thank you. Rehabilitation. Has that been looked at then as one of the mechanisms for, because if we're saying that you can link this behavior to this alcohol, and there are many people who are using alcohol, has that line been drawn between that and that? Because we keep saying eradicate, right? And we can see that this is one of the major causes of it, as an example. So has the alcoholism been looked at as and said, okay, if we're trying to remove this GBV and we see that this is a cause, can we now attack this alcoholism? Or is it too basic?
When we come to say that men may be taken to rehabilitation centers, I know very well that in Kiambu County we don't have government rehabilitation centers. And actually these centers are very expensive, especially to the rural areas. They cannot afford to pay for their sons, to pay for their fathers, so that they can be rehabilitated.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
In the community you come from, has alcohol always been there, even from the time of your grandfather and his father?
It has been there. Even my father was taking alcohol.
Yes.
But mind you, there are these alcohol. What will we call them? Kumi. They are so addictive, and at the same time they are very cheap.
Yes.
So even a man with 50 shillings bob can be able to afford, and that cheapness of a cup of that alcohol makes the person be very.
So we're talking about, it's not the alcohol, it's the type of alcohol.
Type of alcohol, yes.
Okay, now that we come to government.
So it's drug abuse.
Yeah, you have seen periodic government campaigns towards elimination of what we call illicit brews in some areas in this country. And we normally do that based on the protection of families. And one of the reasons of protecting the families is now suppressing the issues of gender-based violence. Okay. And I think it's common that government has been very aggressive on dealing with the illicit brews.
When you do your surveys to look at, prevalence of gender-based violence, what are the top 3 counties?
Majorly the top 3 counties, I try to call, but we usually measure majorly those people who have ever experienced physical violence. And depending on the last Kenya Demographic and Health Survey of 2022, Bungoma County ranks the highest at 62%. That means in every 100 women in Bungoma County, 62 women indicated that they have ever experienced physical violence since they were age 15. There are other counties that come in strongly, like Samburu. We have the counties in the Nyanza region, the Homa Bay, the Migori counties, and other counties that are recording, even above 40% kind of prevalence as far as physical violence is concerned.
And Nairobi is pretty higher there as well.
Not confirmed for figures for Nairobi, but I think it's below 40%.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, from that 2022 survey, Nairobi was among the top 10. Yeah. So you can see that many of these counties are, there's very high prevalence. Yeah. Then you ask yourself, why? Why Bungoma? Why Bungoma? Why Busia? Yeah. Why would we say Homa Bay?
Yeah.
Why?
The good thing with the national surveys is gives you the county indications of where they are high. And as government or as State Department for Gender, we now go into that county to find, what are the reasons. And for example, we are strong in Bungoma, and we have realized it's not even the entire of Bungoma, it's particularly in Mount Elgon region. And you'll find that there are high cases of FGM and generally the gender-based violence. So the national information just point to us the hotspot areas. And from that, we start now carrying out interventions. For example, we have, done a lot of trainings on counseling, counseling and mediation within those regions to different groups of people, including elders, the support elders, those who are custodians of some of those cultures within that area.
So culture plays a big role.
Yeah, it does, and the holders of those custodians of cultural roles, they're very influential in determining the eradication of gender-based violence.
And I keep asking this question. So we have all these laws. We have a highly educated population in this country.
Yeah.
We have all these policies and laws. We have even a body at the national level that is addressing FGM specifically. We have had all these bodies that are dealing with GBV and SGBV, but we still see these cultural practices still being rampant. Do we ask ourselves why? Why are these communities not willing to drop FGM, for example?
Yeah, but for laws, the major challenge we continue face is the lack of accountability in implementation of some of the things we have captured into laws. But on a soft note, we have taken the approach of building capacity of those people who are supposed to, to take a form of accountability. The police, the administrative officers, just to remind them, how do they deal with or address the issues of gender-based violence within their community. So it's a war. We keep fighting to make sure that everybody is held accountable to this kind of war. Yeah.
I want to take you back into history.
Yeah.
I like history.
Yeah.
The time of your grandfather,
Yeah.
and probably before then, there was no police service.
Yeah.
There was alcohol.
Yeah.
There were men and women.
Yeah.
How did they manage all the societal norms that we're now grappling with? Men meeting violence on women, all these. How did they manage it?
I think those time we had very strong community structures that were involved in even suppressing the issues of gender-based violence. Unfortunately, some of those community structures are breaking down.
So what community structures do we currently have?
Right now, we advocate that the judiciary should take charge whenever we have criminal cases of.
I want you to pause right there. The judiciary, the police, social issues, they have to be called in, and yet in these communities there are people. What role do you think they should play in ensuring that whatever it is that they feel, or are we saying that societies have abrogated their responsibilities? So as far as they are concerned, anything that goes wrong, you call the police, you go to court, and that they have no role whatsoever in ensuring that there is balance in their community?
No, I'm not saying that they don't have role. We keep. I just mentioned the work we are doing in Bungoma with the Council of Elders, just to make sure that those structures are strengthened and they actually become champions of ending gender-based violence. And we have built the capacity even to improve their skills in mediation in light of the changing world as far as other things are concerned. Even the issues of advancement in technology that sometimes there are some kind of causes for gender-based violence. So you see how the world is evolving. Yeah.
I want to narrow it down.
Yeah.
Have you considered and looked at the role that men have on younger men and the influence that they have?
Yeah, again, I think I responded to that when we are saying we are still looking at strategies, concrete strategies that we will deploy as far as engagement of men that will include also young men in supporting our initiatives. Yeah.
Tom Ondiek says community elders should be given more prominence, like in the old days. Maybe some of those issues are there. We have started, breaking down, even us accepting that we had community structures, that we are no longer even promoting them. We are saying, let's do court, let's do police, let's bring chief and askari wake. Maybe it's a big issue to consider.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for joining us, Baldwin. Baldwin Anyega is an economist with the State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action, and Joanne Wagashi-Kenyanjui is a GBV responder and gender champion working with Grassroots Kenya. They work in the communities, addressing and advocating against issues of SGBV. Sylvia Maina was here earlier. She's a gender communication specialist at the UN Women in charge of Eastern and Southern Africa. Keep it here for more conversations coming up in the next hour. Remember, Woolworths is telling you, come between now and the 2nd of December. Buy 3, pay for 2, get 1 free. 8 a.m.